Now 2.5, the domains and idealized cognitive models. An important insight of Fillmore and Lakoff in their early work on frames and domains is that the knowledge represented in the frame is itself a conceptualization of experience that often does not match the reality. The example most cited to illustrate this point in the cognitive literature, not just linguistics, but also philosophy, psychology, and artificial intelligence, is the concept of bachelor. Fillmore, 1975.
Right, a simple conceptual analysis of bachelor is an adult unmarried male. This definition may suit most normal cases, but there are a number of cases where speakers react with uncertainty as to whether the person involved is bachelor or not. For example, 19A, the Pope, Tarzan. C, an adult male living with his girlfriend. D, a male homosexual. E, a male homosexual living with his boyfriend. F, a 17-year-old living on his own, running his own internet firm and dating several women. CF, a 17-year-old living with his parents and going to school, who virtually all agree is not a bachelor.
Now, the apparent problem with this simple definition of bachelor as adult unmarried male is not that the definition is too simple. There is a sense in which the meaning of bachelor really is just adult unmarried male. It is just that the concept bachelor is profiled against a frame that does not accommodate the variety of actual social statuses found in the real world. The frame of bachelor represents an idealized version of the world that simply does not include all the possible real-world situations. Lakoff calls such a frame as an idealized cognitive model, ICM. Lakoff, 1987.
Now, the analysis proposed in the preceding paragraph makes it look as if the information in the frame for the idealized cognitive model, just adult unmarried male, is simpler than the reality that often does not match the idealization. But it is not. The ICM for bachelor, or rather the ICMs for adult, unmarried, and male, have to include much more information than is usually associated with those labels. The ICM for adult must include reference to living arrangements, relationships to parents, and occupational activity. For example, 19B, Tarzan. 19F, a 17-year-old living on his own, running his own internet firm, and dating several women. CF, a 17-year-old living with his parents and going to school, who virtually all agree is not a bachelor.
Now, the ICM for unmarried must include a life history sequence in which adolescence is followed by an absence of lasting sexual relationships and then followed by marriage without taking vows of celibacy. 19A and C. 19A, the Pope. 19C, an adult male living with his girlfriend. Now, the ICM for male must also include sexual orientation with an eye to reproduction. For 19D, that is a male homosexual, and 19E, that is a male homosexual living with his boyfriend.
Yes, in other words, the ICMs for bachelor are going to be as detailed and as hedged as reality in order to describe the ideal life history and lifestyle that is implied by bachelor. Searle, in 1979, argues that in fact the frame for any word concept is going to be infinitely complex. Searle is interested in what he calls the background assumptions for defining the literal meaning of words. In frame semantic terms, the background assumptions are the frames for undertaking the literal meaning of a linguistic expression. Searle argues that the sort of background knowledge that is relevant to a linguistic expression's meaning cannot be enumerated in such a way that all contexts of use can be predicted. That is, a basically infinite set of background assumptions are required to characterize the literal meaning of an utterance, and hence its appropriate use in context.
Yes, consider the following example. Basar, 1979. 20. Give me a hamburger, medium rare, with ketchup and mustard, but easy on the relish. Now we assume we understand what the meaning of this request is. We invoke a background frame of fast food restaurants, the ordering and serving of food, how a hamburger is cooked and garnished, and so on.
But there is more to it than that. Suppose, for example, that the hamburger is brought to me and cached in a cubic yard of solid lucid plastic so rigid that it takes a jackhammer to bust it open. Or suppose the hamburger is a mile wide and is delivered to me by smashing down the wall of the restaurant and sliding the edge of it in.
Yeah, right. These situations are admittedly unlikely to be encountered in real life in the way that unmarried men living with their girlfriends or homosexual men commonly are encountered. Nevertheless, in the frame for ordering a hamburger, we would want to represent the assumptions that it is not supposed to be too large, nor encased in solid lucid plastic, nor any of an indefinitely large number of other things that one could do to a hamburger. Now Langacker makes a similar observation with a similar type of example given in 21. He is barely keeping his head above the water.
Now, we may think we know what this sentence means. He is barely keeping his head above the water. But imagine a race over the ocean by helicopter where the contestants must transport a severed head suspended by a rope from the helicopter from the starting line to the finish. A contestant is disqualified if the head he is carrying ever dips below the water's surface.
Now, in other words, we have to bring to bear our full knowledge of the way the world is, or more accurately, the way we expect the world to be, in order to describe the precise meaning of an utterance. Another way of saying this is the more common way of saying it in cognitive linguistics is that we have to call on our encyclopedic knowledge in order to properly understand a concept. Now, some semantists have argued that only a small subset of our knowledge of a concept needs to be presented as a linguistic meaning of a word. This is known as the dictionary view of linguistic meaning.
You're right, but the frame semantic model of linguistic meaning highlights the failings of the dictionary view. The dictionary view fails because it generally describes only the concept profile, or at best, a very simplified version of the concept frame implicit in a concept profile. Once one begins to specify the conceptual structure of the frame that supports the concept profile for a word or linguistic expression, the semantic structure quickly expands to encompass the total encyclopedic knowledge that speakers have about the concept symbolized by the word or construction.
Now, of course, encyclopedic knowledge is all interconnected in our minds. If the meaning of a word includes the frame as well as the profile, then one must abandon the concept of word meanings as small, discrete chunks of conceptual structure. Now, Langacker proposes an alternative model of the meaning of a word as an access node into the knowledge network. The entity designated by a symbolic unit can therefore be thought of as a point of access to a network. The semantic value of a symbolic unit is given by the open-ended set of relations in which this access node participates. Each of these relations is a cognitive routine, and because they share at least one component, the activation of one routine facilitates but does not always necessitate the activation of another.
Now a word meaning is therefore a perspective on our knowledge of the word, as seen through the concept profiled by the word. This view of word meaning is not that different from the view of a conceptual category in cognitive psychology as a means of accessing further information about the individual categorized. This view of word meaning also highlights how choosing a word is a way of construing the relationship between the experience being communicated and the interlocutor's existing knowledge. In the example of the ICM for the word bachelor, the deviations from the ICM were all examples in which it is not clear whether bachelor is applicable to those cases at all. For other words, a modifier is appended to the word to indicate deviation from the ICM.
Yes, for example, Lakoff describes the ICM for mother as involving a cluster of several different ICMs. Birth, the person giving birth is the mother. Genetic, the female who contributed the genetic material is the mother. Nutrients, the female adult who nurtures and raises a child is the mother of that child. Marital, the wife of the father is the mother. Genealogical, the closest female ancestor is the mother.
Now the cluster of ICM, as Lakoff names it, is essentially a domain matrix. Thanks both to modern medicine and to traditional social arrangements, the real world has many cases where only parts of the cluster model for mother applies to particular individuals. These deviations from the cluster ICM are indicated by conventional compounds and adjective plus noun expressions.
Like stepmother fits the nutrients and marital models but none of the others. Foster mother fits the nutrients model but none of the others. Birth mother fits the birth model but none or not all of the others. Genetic mother fits the genetic model but not all of the others. And unwed mother fits probably all the marital model, etc. Nevertheless, one might again still obtain varying results if asking of individuals falling under any of the categories in such examples like mother, foster mother, stepmother, whether she is the real mother of the child.
Now, in other cases, there is clearly an ICM, but linguistic convention has allowed the word unmodified to describe situations that lack some of the properties of the ICM. Fillmore gives the example of the ICM for breakfast, which has its frame a cycle of meals and profiles the one which is eaten early in the day after a period of sleep, and for it to consist of a somewhat unique menu.
But you can work through the night and have eggs, toast, and so on at sunup and call it breakfast. You can sleep till 3 p.m., get up and have eggs, toast, and so on and call it breakfast. And you can sleep through the night and in the morning have chocolate cream pie and martini and call it breakfast.
Right. Each of these cases lacks one feature of the ICM for breakfast. One can also call a meal breakfast that lacks both early in the day and after a period of sleep too. Restaurants exist that serve breakfast all day, the menu feature appears to be more important than the other two. Another example similar to breakfast is the ICM for lie. The ICM for lie such that a speaker S telling an addressee A the proposition P is a lie is 24A, P is false. B, S believes P to be false. C, in uttering P, S intends to deceive A.
Now Coleman and Kay performed an experiment with stories designed to test every combination of the features listed in 24 and found that in general the situations with more of the three properties 24 ABC tended to be described by experimental subjects more often as lies than situations with fewer of the properties. Two situations at least have conventional expressions that indicate their deviation from the ICM. Polite social lies such as saying, "What a lovely party," or "How nice to see you," can be said in circumstances in which 24AB, that is P is false, or S believes P to be false, hold, but 24C, like in uttering P, S intends to deceive A, does not.
The other situation can be illustrated with the exchange in Coleman and Kay. John, where are you going? Mary, meaning out to buy John's birthday present, says, "We're out of paprika." Now, in this situation in 24A or B do not hold, but 24C does. Just the opposite of social lies. In this situation, an English speaker could say that Mary is being economical with the truth.
Now in the case of breakfast and lie, the word profile extends to a range of situations whose features vary. Nevertheless, there appears to be agreement as to the situation that counts as the ICM for these words. ICMs thus give rise to judgments of grade and centrality to members of the category, a phenomenon that is usually described as prototype effects.
Now 2.6, mental spaces. Semantic frames or domains represent one of the two major organizing principles for conceptual structure. The other important organizing principle is the one illustrated by the examples in 26. 26A, Gina bought a sports car. B, Giorgio believes that Gina bought a sports car. C, Paolo believes that Gina bought a pickup truck. D, Gina wants to buy a sports car. E, Gina wants to buy a sports car. Gina will. F, if Gina buys a sports car, then she will drive to Paris.
Now, in 26A, that is Gina bought a sports car, a situation is asserted or profiled evoking the frame or domain of commercial transactions. In 26B, Georgia believes that Gina bought a sports car. The same situation is represented but as a belief rather than a fact. Example 26C, Paolo believes that Gina bought a pickup truck. Here, it demonstrates that such belief may be at variance with the facts and with other beliefs.
Now in 27D, that is, Gina wants to buy a sports car, the same apparent situation is also represented, but it has a different status. The event has not taken place. It is only something in Gina's mind. In fact, even the sports car may exist only in Gina's mind. Example 26E says Gina will buy a sports car is more similar to 26D than 26A. 26D, Gina wants to buy a sports car and Gina bought a sports car. 26A, even if it is a prediction about the real world, the event has not taken place. Finally, in example 26F, that is, if Gina buys a sports car, then she will drive to Paris. Here, the event is again hypothetical, and so in the event described in the consequent, so is the event described in the consequent clause.
Now in truth conditional semantics 26a, that is, Gina bought a sports car, is unproblematic. But 26b to f, that is, Giorgio believes that Gina bought a sports car, Paolo believes that Gina bought a pickup truck, D. Gina wants to buy a sports car, E. Gina will buy a sports car, F. If Gina buys a sports car, then she will drive to Paris, are problematic.
Now the situation, Gina has bought a sports car, is false in 26D and E, that is, Gina wants to buy a sports car and Gina will buy a sports car.
Yeah, right, but not necessarily false in 26B to D, that is, Giorgio believes that Gina bought a sports car, Paolo believes that Gina bought a pickup truck, and D. Gina wants to buy a sports car, or even 26F, which is, if Gina buys a sports car, then she will drive to Paris.
Now, one must be able to distinguish between the status of situations depending on whether they are true in the real world or whether they are only true in someone's beliefs or desires or true in another time in the real world. In a truth conditional semantics, the standard way of representing the status of situations is as possible worlds. There is the real world, and then there are worlds with situations that are possible but not necessarily actual. Possible worlds are then identified with a person's beliefs or wishes or some other mental attitude. Possible worlds pose metaphysical problems for many people. However, do possible worlds exist? If so, or especially if not, where are they?
Now, Fauconnier in 1985 proposes an alternative model of representing the status of language, of knowledge, that is metaphysically more attractive and allows for elegant solutions to a number of problems in semantic and pragmatic analysis. Fauconnier replaces the notion of a possible world with that of a mental space and argues that the mental space is a cognitive structure, that is, the allocation of a situation to Gina's desire or Paolo's belief, or the hypothetical situation is done in the mind of the speaker and hearer, not in some as yet unclear metaphysical location. Fauconnier then proposes a set of principles for the interpretation of utterances and the assignment of situations to the appropriate mental space. We briefly present Fauconnier's. Now let's talk about the Fauconnier's model, and a number of examples here. The reader should consult his work for detailed arguments in favor of his model over truth conditional approaches to the same phenomenon.
Now, utterances such as 26A, like Gina bought a sports car, are normally construed as situating events or states in a base space. Fauconnier. Normally the present reality, more precisely, the mutually known world of the interlocutors. In Fauconnier 1985, this is called the reality space.
Now, utterances such as 27B to F, like B, in the photo she has a black hair. C, in the movie Ian McKellen is Gandalf. D, in this game aces are low. E, I don't have a car. Either you take a cab or you walk home. Now here, these have elements that Fauconnier describes as space builders, including in their meaning is the setting up of a new space different from the base space and linked to it. Space builders include a wide range of semantic phenomena corresponding not only to possible words in logical semantics, but also a variety of other operators, including temporal expressions in 27a, that is, in 1770, France was a monarchy.
Image or picture noun context, like in 27b, that is, in the photo she has a black hair. Now, fictional situations, like in 27c, that is, in the movie, Ian McKellen is Gandalf. And then, games and other systems, like in 27d, that is, in this game, aces are low. And negation and disjunction, like in I don't have a car. The other, either you take a cab or you walk home. And the separate cases in quantification, like in every guest not got a receipt.
Now, all those examples have in common the building of a mental space in which a situation is held to be true in that space only. More generally, we can say that just as words and constructions evoke semantic frames or domains, words and constructions also build spaces. At the very least, they build or evoke the base space. The relevant word or construction then conventionally specifies that the asserted situation holds in the appropriate space. Now, between the base space and any built space, there must be a mapping of the elements found in each space. Many interesting and puzzling semantic and pragmatic phenomena are a product of the possible mappings between spaces.
Now, we may divide the phenomena found in the mapping into two parts. First, what do the named elements of the built space, for example, Gina and sports car, correspond to, if anything, in the base space? Second, what conceptual structures from the base space also occur in the built space or spaces and vice versa? Now we begin with the first question.
Now in 26D, that is, Gina wants to buy a sports car, it seems straightforward to say that the person named Gina is in the desired space built by Gina wants is mapped onto Gina in the base space, but the object described as a sports car may or may not correspond to anything in the base space. Gina may have seen a particular car on the lot, or she may not have any specific car in mind. This is the distinction between a specific and non-specific reading, respectively, of a sports car in the sentence Gina wants to buy a sports car. The specific and non-specific readings are represented in figure 2.4.
Now, Fauconnier crucially distinguishes between roles and values in mappings between spaces. A role is a linguistic description describing a category. A value is an individual that can be described by that category. Roles can be a category or type with various instances or tokens. Sports car is such a role, since there are many instances, values of sports cars. A role can also be a category that is filled by a single individual at one time, but by different individuals over time. Like the President of the United States is an example of such a role. Roles and values are specific to a single mental space, and all counterpart relations between roles and values in different spaces must be established cognitively by the interlocutors.
Now figure 2.4 easily represents the difference between the specific and non-specific readings. In the specific reading of 26D, that is, Gina wants to buy a sports car, the value x bar of a sports car in Gina's want space G has a counterpart value x. In reality, the car she saw on the lot. In the non-specific reading, there is no counterpart value in reality. She imagines a sports car she wants, but has not identified it with any existing car.
Now, one of Fauconier's central insights is that many puzzling semantic phenomena are the result of the fact that a value in one space can be described by the role its counterpart in the another space has, even if that role is invalid for the value in the first space. This is the access principle. Fauconier, 1997. It is called the ID principle of Fauconier. For example, 28. In 1929, the lady with white hair was blonde is not contradictory.
Right. Now, the value in the 1929 temporal space, the blonde girl, is being described with a role, lady with white hair, from the base space, that is the current reality. Now, armed with the distinctions between mental spaces, between roles and values within spaces and across spaces, and the access principle, Fauconier goes on to explain a wide range of semantic and pragmatic phenomena using these distinctions. Only a selection of these can be described here. The phenomena described as referential opacity is illustrated in 29, that is, Oedipus wants to marry his mother. Now, in the Greek myth, 29, that he wants to marry his mother is true under one reading. His mother equals the person you and I know is Oedipus's mother, but falls under another, that is his mother, that is the person Oedipus believes is his mother.
Now, this distinction is due to the fact that Oedipus does not know that Jocasta is his mother. In mental space terms, the individual value named Jocasta does not fill the role his mother in Oedipus's belief space, although she does in reality space.
Now, in the true reading of 29, that is, Oedipus wants to marry his mother, the description his mother for J in R is used for the value J bar in O by the access principle. The false reading of 29, that is, Oedipus wants to marry his mother, uses the description his mother in O, but it does not apply to J bar in O. A similar analysis can be applied to referential or attributive ambiguities.
Now, only a few further examples can be given of how Fauconier's model handles a variety of complex reference and identity phenomena. 30A, Rose is blonde, but George thinks she's a redhead. B, Hitchcock saw himself in that movie. C, I didn't buy a car, otherwise I would drive it to work. D, your car is always different. E, if I were a millionaire, my VW would be a rose. F, Hesperus, the morning star, is Phosphorus, the evening star.
Now in 30A, that is, Rose is blonde but George thinks she's a redhead, and B, that Hitchcock saw himself in that movie, the pronoun identifies a value in a built space, George's beliefs, the movie, by referring to its counterpart in the base space, that is the blonde Rose, Hitchcock. Now in 30C, that is, I did buy a car, otherwise I'd drive it to work. The pronoun refers to a value in a negative space which has no counterpart in reality, otherwise would evokes the same negative space. See example 32 below. 32. It is possible that John has children, and it is possible that John's children are away.
Now in 30D, that is, your car is always different, your car refers to a role, and the predicate describes its changes in value over a sequence of temporal spaces. In 30E, that is, if I were a millionaire, my VW would be a rose. The value filling the role, a rose in the counterfactual space is identified with the value filling the role my VW in reality. In 30F, that is, Hesperus, the morning star, is Phosphorus, the evening star. Here, a classic philosophy example. Two distant values in the prior reality space are identified as one value in the current reality space.
Right. The second set of phenomena that Fauconnier explores is what conceptual structures from the base space also occur in the built space or spaces and vice versa. For example, in 26D, that is, someone wants to buy a sports car. How much of our knowledge here of reality should be attributed to the hypothetical space? Obviously, one cannot attribute to the hypothetical space the real world fact that Gina has not bought a sports car. That is precisely what is asserted in the hypothetical space. On the other hand, at least other information about Gina and about sports cars, not to mention much other knowledge about the world, may be attributed to the hypothetical space.
Fauconnier first addresses the question of presuppositions. Presuppositions are situations that are part of the frame of a concept but are not asserted. The question is, what is the relationship of presuppositions in a built space to those in the base space? For example, consider the sentence in 31. A. If Max has gone to the meeting, then Max's children are alone. B. If Max has children, Max's children are American. The phrase Max's children presupposes that Max has children. That is, a referring expression presupposes the existence of its reference.
Now, the traditional pragmatic analysis is that one must determine the presupposition of the whole sentence from the presuppositions of its parts. Presupposition projection. In 31A, that is, if Max has gone to the meeting, then Max's children are alone. The presupposition that Max has children projects to base space. But in 31B, that is, if Max has children, Max's children are American. Here it does not project because it is asserted in the antecedent clause, Max may or may not have children in the base space reality.
Now Fauconnier instead introduces the principle of presupposition float. Informally, a presupposition floats up from a built space to its base space until it meets itself or its opposite. In example 31A, that is, if Max has gone to the meeting, then Max's children are alone. Here, the built space presupposes that Max has children but does not assert it. Hence, the presupposition can float to the base space. In example 31B, if Max has children, Max's children are American. Here, however, the built space asserts that Max has children, and hence the presupposition cannot float beyond it to the base space.
Now, two more complicated examples are given in 32, 33. 32, it is possible that John has children, and it is possible that John's children are away. 33, Luke believes it's raining and hopes that it will stop raining.
Examples: 32, it is possible that John has children, and it is possible that John's children are away. 33, Luke believes it's raining and hopes it will stop raining. Demonstrate that space builders may have the same space or related non-real mental spaces. In 32, it is possible that John has children, and it is possible that John's children are away. Here, it is possible in the second conjunct can be construed as evoking the same possibility space that was built in the first conjunct. In this case, the presupposition that John has children is asserted in the hypothetical space in the first conjunct, and therefore it does not float to the base space.
Now example 33, that is Luke believes it's raining and hopes that it will stop raining, demonstrates that certain built spaces are related in privileged ways that allow presuppositions to float. A hope for some situation can be built on one's belief. Hence, the presupposition that it is raining in the second clause of 33, that is Luke believes it's raining and hopes that it will stop raining, is built on the assertion in the first clause and therefore does not float to the base space.
Now reversing the relation between the two spaces fails because beliefs cannot be built on hope. 34. Luke hopes that it is raining and believes that it will stop raining. Not nice. Fauconnier then turns to the question of counterfactual conditionals, as in 35. If Boris had not gone, Olga would have come anyway.
Now a counterfactual conditional builds a space in which the antecedent clause, like Boris does not come, is explicitly the opposite of the base space. Boris did come. Again, the question is, what structures in the base space are also found in the built space? Fauconnier argues that previous truth conditional approaches to counterfactuals transfer as much of the structure of the base space as possible to the counterfactual space. Fauconnier instead advocates an analysis in which the only structure relevant for the counterfactual reasoning is transferred to the counterfactual space. He argues that the great flexibility of counterfactuals precludes transferring too much of the structure of the base space to the counterfactual space. For example, 36a, if Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, he would have been Macedonian. And 36d, if Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, Alexander would have been Corsican.
36a, if Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, he would have been Macedonian. B, if Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, he would have won the Battle of Waterloo. C, if Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, he would not have been Napoleon. D, if Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, Alexander would have been Corsican. Fauconnier writes, it would not make sense to evaluate the absolute truth of any of these statements, but they can all be used to make some point, which requires only very partial structuring of H, that is the counterfactual space. Such examples suggest that there is no general linguistic algorithm for going from R, that is the base space, to H, the counterfactual space.
Now in Fauconnier's more recent work, Fauconnier 97, he and Turner have emphasized the fact that information from two different spaces, such as those in the counterfactual conditionals in 36a to D, A. If Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, he would have been Macedonian. B. If Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, he would have won the Battle of Waterloo. C. If Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, he would not have been Napoleon. D. If Napoleon had been the son of Alexander, Alexander would have been Corsican. So here it is blended in the resulting space, and that this blending process occurs in a much wider range of contexts than counterfactual conditionals.
For example, 37, that is, at this point, Great America 2 is barely maintaining a 4.5-day lead over Northern Lights. Here, it blends elements of voyage by the catamaran Great America 2 from Boston to San Francisco in 1993 with a voyage by the clipper Northern Lights on the same route in 1853.
Now obviously Northern Light is nowhere to be seen in 1993, but the blend of the 1853 temporal space and the 1993 temporal space in 37, that is at this point Great America 2 is barely maintaining a 4.5-day lead over Northern Light, makes a point about the progress of Great America 2.
Indeed, in Fauconnier and Turner's blending theory, example 37, that is at this point Great America 2 is barely maintaining a 4.5-day lead over Northern Light, evokes four mental spaces. Two input spaces in 37, that is at this point Great America 2 is barely maintaining a 4.5-day lead over Northern Light. The 1853 and 1993 temporal spaces, a generic space which abstracts the commonalities from the two spaces, that is the route of travel, distance traversed, and time taken, etc., and thereby defines the cross-space mapping between the elements in the two input spaces and a blended space, which creates a novel expressive effect, in this case an image of a race between the current boat and a boat from the 19th century.
Right. Fauconnier and Turner in 2002 argue that blending is a process of space mapping that pervades human reasoning and explore the phenomena of blending in a wide range of phenomena, most notably metaphor. Now at this point, blending theory has moved quite a distance from the mental space theory. Mental space theory illustrates how utterances evoke not just semantic frames but also spaces representing the status of our knowledge, like belief, desire, hypotheticals, counterfactuals that are relative to reality. How language uses links between different spaces in referring to individuals, and how knowledge can float between spaces. The blending theory has shifted the focus to how information from two spaces construed broadly to include domains is combined to produce novel conceptual structures. This aspect of the blending theory is discussed with respect to metaphor in 8.3.
Now in this chapter we have focused on the fact that the original mental space theory describes a significant dimension for the structuring of our conceptual knowledge orthogonal to semantic frames or domains, and offers solutions to many semantic and pragmatic problems in addition to those illustrated in this section.
Now third chapter, conceptualization and construal operations. First section is introduction. Now in chapter 1, we noted that one of the basic hypotheses of cognitive linguistics is that in Langacker's words, semantics is conceptualization. This hypothesis challenges the view that semantics is purely truth conditional. We have already seen in Chapter 2 the examples of semantic interpretations of linguistic expressions that go beyond truth conditional semantics. Situations can be framed in different ways. For example, my dad versus father, and waste time versus spend time. In my dad wasted most of the morning on the bus, and these ways convey to the hearer different conceptualizations of the relationship between the speaker and the speaker's father, of the positive or negative quality of the situation being described, and even of the nature of the situation being described, characterizing time in terms of money.
Yes, framing is pervasive in language, as we argued in Chapter 2. All linguistic units evoke a semantic frame, yet framing is but one example of the ubiquity of conceptualization in linguistic expression. All aspects of the grammatical expression of a situation involve conceptualization in one way or another, including inflectional and derivational morphology and even the basic parts of speech. Whenever we utter a sentence, we unconsciously structure every aspect of the experience we intend to convey. The purpose of this chapter is to describe the range of conceptualization processes or construal operations that human beings employ in language.
Yes, the role of conceptualization in language is clearest when a single language provides alternative expressions for what appears to be truth-functionally equivalent situations. The example of framing given above contrasts different lexical expressions, dad, father, and spend, waste, that otherwise appear to be truth-functionally equivalent. We deliberately hedge on the phrase truth-functionally equivalent because it often turns out that there are some situations that so favor one conceptualization over another that the other expression is unacceptable, and so the two expressions are not always judged as truth-functionally equivalent. But it is equally easy to find examples of inflectional and derivational contrasts between otherwise approximately truth-functionally equivalent expressions.
Sentences 1a, leaves on the tree. B, foliage on the tree. 2a, Connor lives in New York City. B, Connor is living in New York City. 3a, the chimney is above the window. 3b, the window is above the chimney. 4a, something moved in the grass. B, there was a movement in the grass. 5a, the car brushed the bicycle. B, the bicycle was brushed by the car. 6a, there was sand sitting on the floor. B, sand was sitting on the floor.
Now examples 1a-b, that is leaves on the tree, b, foliage on the tree, and 2a-b, Connor lives in New York City, b, Connor is living in New York City, differ in the choice of nominal and verbal inflection. 1a-b, that is leaves on the tree and foliage on the tree, by plural count noun and mass noun, and 2a-b, that is Connor lives in New York City and Connor is living in the New York City, by the choice of a simple versus a progressive form.
Examples 3a-b, the chimney is above the window. B, the window is below the chimney. Differ in the choice of a function word, in this case a preposition, and a reversal of subject and prepositional complement choice. Examples 4a-b, A, something moved in the grass. B, there was a movement in the grass. Differ derivationally in part of speech between a verb and its derived noun. Examples 5a-b, 5a, the car was brushed by the bicycle. B, the bicycle was brushed by the car. Differ in, and 6a-b, there was Sam sitting on the floor. B, Sam was sitting on the floor. They differ in grammatical construction used to describe the scene, active versus passive voice in 5, and presentational versus ordinary declarative in 6.
Now, all of these sentences seem to be truth functionally equivalent, but English is not being unnecessarily profligate here. The A-B members offer a different conceptualization of the experience in every case. These and other examples will be explicated in the following sections. Similar evidence is found in cases when the same word can be used with two different inflections, derivations, or constructions, and there are subtle but definite conventional truth-functional differences in the two uses. 7a. We have chocolate for dessert. B. We have chocolates for dessert. 8a. Ira is a nuisance. B. Ira, stop being a nuisance. 9a. Timmy is in front of the tree. B. Timmy is behind the tree. 10a. Jill is fussy. B. Jill is a fuss budget. 11a. The dog chewed the bone. B. The dog chewed on the bone.
In 7a, we have chocolate for dessert. The mass noun refers to a substance, but in 7b, we have chocolates for dessert. Here the same noun as a count noun refers to an object which is covered with a substance but may or may not be filled with the same substance. In 8a, Ira is a nuisance. Here, the simple present describes a behavior trait of Ira's, while 8b, Ira, stop being a nuisance, describes a particular activity of his. Examples 9a and 9b, that is, Timmy is in front of the tree, B, Timmy is behind the tree. These differ in Timmy's position relative to the speaker and the tree. To make 9a, that is, Timmy is in front of the tree, and 9b, that is, Timmy is behind the tree, are truth functionally equivalent. The speaker would have to move to the other side of the tree.
Examples 10a. Jill is fussy describes a behavioral trait of Jill, but 10b, that is, Jill is a fuss budget, describes the same trait as a constant and annoying aspect of Jill's personality. In example 11a, the dog chewed on the bone. Here the object role of the bone indicates that the bone itself is being affected by the dog's action. But in 11b, the dog chewed on the bone. Here the oblique role indicates that it is only meat and gristle on the bone that is being affected.
Now the examples in 7 to 11 are equally indicative of the role of construal in language as the examples in 1 to 6. The truth functional differences in 7 to 11 are indicative of favored conceptualizations that have led to the extension of a particular construal to a situation that does not easily allow for alternative construals. For example, the fact that certain sweets come in individuated units allows for a construal of the substance noun chocolate as a count noun. Compare, I'd like an orange juice, please, and chocolate as a count noun is extended to other such sweets where only the perceptually salient outer surface is made of chocolate.
But both a chocolate and an orange juice share the construal of an individuated unit, even if the link to the substance is more tenuous in the former case. Now, in fact, in cognitive linguistics, conceptualization is the fundamental semantic phenomena. Whether alternative construals give rise to differences in truth conditions or not is a derivative semantic fact. Now, in some cases where construal is accompanied by a truth-functional semantic shift in meaning, English allows speakers to express the construal plus shift overtly, as in 12, stop acting like a nuisance. 13, I'd like a glass of orange juice, please. Now, example 12, Stop acting like a nuisance uses the process verb act and a manner construction to denote the activity. And 13, that is, I'd like a glass of orange juice please, uses a container word glass and the partitive construction to denote the individuated amount of juice. This is not always possible in English. For example, a chocolate does not have an obvious overt expression of its individuation, and there is no simple overt expression of the different types of chewing actions in 11a to b. Now, other languages require overt expression of construal plus shift in contrast to English. For example, Vietnamese cannot simply use a mass noun in a count noun construction or vice versa, as English does in 7, that is 7a, we have chocolate for dessert, b, we have chocolates for dessert, and Russian requires overt marking of the following examples where English does not. 14a, soloma, that is straw, mass. B, solomka, that is a straw, account, American English. Now 15a, on kriksal, that is he cried or he was cried multiple times. 15b, on kriknul, that is he cried once.
Now in 14b, solom inka, Russian, requires the singulative suffix ink before the gender case inflection a in order to use the mass noun self, solom, in account construction. English simply uses straw in either construction with a concomitant truth conditional semantic shift. In 15b, onkrik null, that is, he cried once, Russian requires a semelfactive suffix nu before the past inflection la in order to use the extended activity verb stem krik in the once only construal. English simply uses cry in the simple past or the past progressive with the relevant semantic shift.
Thus, there is cross-linguistic and language internal variation as to whether construal plus truth conditional semantic shift is expressed covertly or overtly. We will call the former coercion and the latter conversion. Now, there is no uniformity in terminology in the literature. Unfortunately, coercion, conversion, and shift have all been used for the covert case. Now, we see no significant difference between coercion and conversion.
Right. We see no significant difference between coercion and conversion in conceptual semantic terms. In both cases, the truth conditional semantic shift that accompanies the construal is conventionalized in the language and cannot be assumed to carry over to other languages or even other words in the same language. In both cases, what we are interested in is the construal process itself, and this is a part of both conversion and coercion. Now, there are many construal operations that have been identified by cognitive linguists and by other linguists who take a conceptualist approach to linguistic semantics. There have also been various proposals for grouping together construal operations that appear to be related. The most comprehensive classifications are those of Talmy and Langacker.
Now, Talmy proposes a four-way classification under the name of imaging systems, given in 16. 1. Structural schematization. 2. Deployment of perspective. 3. Distribution of attention. 4. Force dynamics. Now, Talmy somewhat alters this classification in the version found in Talmy 2000 and changes their name to schematic systems. The first three categories are basically the same. The first is renamed configurational structure, while force dynamics is dropped entirely and a system called domain consisting solely of the domains of space and time is added. The domain category includes the constructs represented by noun and verb. We believe that force dynamics should be retained as a construal system.
Now, Langacker surveys a wide range of construal operations under the rubric of focal adjustments. His classification of focal adjustments is given in 17. 1. Selection. 2. Perspective. A. Figure or ground. B. Viewpoint. C. Deixis. D. Subjectivity or objectivity. And 17.3. Abstraction. Now, Talmey's and Langacker's classification have a number of features in common. For example, both have categories of perspective, and Talmey's attentional imaging system includes Langacker's selection and abstraction focal adjustments. These classifications are not comprehensive. However, Fillmore's framing is a construal operation, for example, but does not obviously fall under the categories in either Talmey's or Langacker's classifications.
Lakoff and Johnson's 1980 theory of metaphor is an example of another widespread type of linguistic conceptualization that is not discussed explicitly by either Langacker or Talmey. Langacker himself makes use of other construal operations such as scanning, comparison, and the entity or interconnection distinction that he does not include in his classification of focal adjustments. Now, there is another theoretical construct in cognitive linguistics which imposes a conceptualization of experience, namely image schemas.
Now, image schemas are defined as schematic versions of images. Images are representations of specific embodied experiences. Domains that give rise to images are described as embodied or grounded. These domains are all basic domains as defined. Image schemas are not specific images but are schematic. They represent schematic patterns arising from imagistic domains such as containers, paths, links, forces, and balance that recur in a variety of embodied domains and structure our bodily experience.
Now, image schemas are also not specific to a particular sensory modality. Image schemas structure our bodily experience, and they structure our non-bodily experience as well via metaphor. This definition clarifies the seemingly contradictory description of image schemas sometimes found. Image schemas are abstract in one sense of that word. They are schematic, but not abstract in another sense of that word. They are embodied.
Now, an inventory of image schemas. So, space, up, down, front, back, left, right, near, far, center, periphery, contact. Scale, like path. Container, like containment, in, out. Surface, full, empty. Content. Next, force, like balance, counterforce, compulsion, restraint, enablement, blockage, diversion, attraction. Next, unity or multiplicity, like merging, collection, splitting, iteration, part whole, mass count, link. Next, identity, like matching, superimposition. Next, existence, like removal, bounded space, cycle, object, process.
Now, image schemas are also construals of experience, though they exhibit some of the characteristics of domain as well. Now in this chapter, we present all of the construal operations and image schemas discussed by cognitive linguists under a new classification. Here, an earlier version of this classification is presented in Croft and Wood 2000.
Now, a chief aim of this classification is to demonstrate the close relationship between construal operations proposed by linguists and psychological processes proposed by cognitive psychologists and phenomenologists. If linguistic construal operations are truly cognitive, then they should be related to or identical with general cognitive processes that are postulated by psychologists. In fact, most, if not all, of these construal operations are special cases of general cognitive processes described in psychology and phenomenology. This view follows from the basic hypothesis of cognitive linguistics that language is an instance of general cognitive abilities.
Yes, the classification of construal operations is not intended to be a reduction of construal operations to just 4 processes. The various construal operations listed under the 4 headings are all distinct cognitive processes. The analysis we propose is that the various construal operations are manifestations of the 4 basic cognitive abilities in different aspects of experience. The remainder of this chapter describes and illustrates the construal operations under these 4 headings.
Table 3.1. The linguistic construal operations as instances of general cognitive processes. First, attention or salience. Here, under the first, Roman first, you have A, which is selection, and under selection you have 2, profiling and metonymy. Then you have B under 1, that is attention and salience, that is scope or dominion. Now under scope or dominion, the first is scope of predication, second is the search domains, and third is accessibility. Now, after selection scope, you have scalar adjustment under attention and salience. Under scalar adjustment, that is C, you have 2, that is quantitative abstraction, and second, qualitative, that is schematization. And then you have dynamic after scalar adjustment. Under dynamic, the first is fictive motion, and the second is summary or sequential scanning.
And then is judgment, the second, after attention or salience, is judgment or comparison, including identity image schemas. So under judgment, the first is categorization or framing, the second is metaphor, and the third is figure or ground. And then after judgment or comparison, attention, salience, judgment and comparison, the third is perspective or situatedness. So under perspective, you have A as viewpoint. Under viewpoint, there are 2 things: vantage point, the second is orientation. And after viewpoint, under perspective or situatedness, you have deixis under perspective or situatedness. Under deixis, you have 3, that is first spatiotemporal, including spatial image schemas. The second is epistemic, that is the common ground, and the third under deixis is empathy. And then under perspective situatedness, after deixis and viewpoint is subjectivity or objectivity. And
the fourth, after perspective and situatedness, judgment, comparison, and attention or salience, is the constitution or gestalt, including most other image schemas. So under constitution or gestalt, the first is structural schematization. So under A, that is structural schematization, the first is individuation, that is boundedness or unity or multiplicity. Boundedness and unity or multiplicity. And after individuation, the second is topological or geometric schematization, that is container. and after topological or geometric schematization, the third is scale under constitution or gestalt, under the structural schematization under the constitution or gestalt. And after structural schematization under constitution or gestalt, the second is force dynamics under constitution or gestalt. And then the third under constitution or gestalt is rationality, that is entity or interconnection.
Now 3.2, attention or salience. The process of attention is a well-known basic phenomena in cognitive psychology. Attention appears to be closest to what Schaffe in 1994 calls the focus of consciousness. Attention comes in degrees and is usually modeled in terms of degree of activation of conceptual structures in a neural network model of the mind. The phenomena of attention focuses on human cognitive ability involved, but there are also natural properties of phenomena in the perceived world that lend themselves to being attended to by human beings, and these properties are said to enhance those phenomena's salience to human beings. Attention.
Now, attention is a complex psychological ability whose different aspects can be most easily illustrated by visual ability. One can select one object or another to focus one's attention on. That is, focus on attention is surrounded by a scope of attention. One can take a more coarse-grained or more fine-grained view of a scene, and one can fix one's gaze on a scene or move one's eyes over it. These four aspects of attention are found across all domains of thought.
Now 3.2.1, that is selection. The focal adjustment of selection is our ability to attend to parts of our experience that are relevant to the purpose at hand and ignore aspects of our experience that are irrelevant. The phenomena of profiling a concept in a semantic frame described in detail in Chapter 2 is an example of selection. In most cases, different words in a semantic frame or domain focus our attention on the different elements in the frame. For example, radius, arc, circumference in the circle frame. In other cases, derivational morphology shifts the profile, as in writer whose suffix shifts the profile of write from process to agent. The participant that the suffix selects is not fixed to a single participant role but depends on salience, manifest both in conventionalized forms such as stapler, the instrument, or in novel forms such as clapper. Jane T. describing a lamp that turns on when you clap your hands.
Now, selection of the profile by a single underived word stem is also flexible and subject to construal. For example, many English nouns are also used as verbs. Pan can be construed as profiling either a metal object or a process in the goal-seeking frame. Both the process and the metal object are salient in this frame, hence the choice of one word for both. Likewise, British English speakers can construe bin as profiling either a waste basket or the action of tossing something into the waste basket.
Now, such examples are not usually analyzed as examples of construal, since the profile is, of course, central to a word's meaning, and any shift in profile has truth functional consequences. However, two semantic processes that involve subtler and or more systematic shifts in profile lend themselves to a construal analysis.
The first example is the highlighting of different facets or domains in a domain matrix, as in 19 to 22. 19a, where is the Sunday Times? Physical object or tone? B, have you read the Sunday Times? Semantic content or text? 20a, Paris is a beautiful city. Location. B, Paris closed the Boulevard Saint-Michel. Government. C, Paris elected the Green candidate as mayor. Population. 21a, the Chronicle costs $1. Tone. B, the Chronicle called for his resignation. Editor. C, the Chronicle went bankrupt. Company. 22a, the window is dirty. Pane. B, she came in through the bathroom window. Opening.
Now a newspaper, book, or other embodied text is simultaneously a physical tone and a meaningful text. But 19a, that is, where is the Sunday Times, physical object or tone, selects the physical object facet, and 19b, have you read the Sunday Times, semantic context or text, only the text facet. It contains only the text facet. The range of possible profile facets for a word can be quite wide. For example, 20c, that is, Paris elected the Green candidate as mayor. Population, it selects the voting members of the population, but all Paris turned out to see the king selects a wider but still incomplete set of the population.
The government in 20b, that is, Paris closed the Boulevard Saint-Michel. Government. Here is the city government, but Paris opposes any reform of the common agricultural policy, profiles the national government by virtue of Paris being the capital of France. It is not clear whether different facets count as different senses. Now, the second example is the phenomena of metonymy. Metonymy is loosely the use of a word to denote a concept other than its literal denotation. Examples of metonymy include the following. 23, that French fries is getting impatient. 24, they played lots of Mozart. 25, she heard the piano. 26, I'm in the phone book.
A cognitive linguistic analysis of metonymy is the ability of a speaker to select a different contextually salient concept profile in a domain or domain matrix than the one usually symbolized by the word. In 23-24, there is that French fries is getting impatient and they played lots of Mozart. It is the nouns French fries and Mozart whose concept profiles are shifted. The evidence for this analysis is found in the grammar of the sentences. In 23, that is that French fries is getting impatient, although French fries is plural, the demonstrative modifying it and the verb are singular, indicating that French fries is profiling the single individual who has ordered the French fries.
Yes, in 24, they played lots of Mozart. Although Mozart is countable, the quantifier modifying it is used with mass nouns, indicating that Mozart is profiling the abstract, uncountable music of Mozart. Now in 25 and 26, that she heard the piano and I'm in the phone book. However, Langacker argues that it is the verbs whose concept profiles are shifted. This shift in verb concept profile is an example of what Langacker describes as an active zone analysis. In an active zone analysis, the relational predication, that is the verb, adjective, adverb, or preposition, they adjust its meaning to accommodate its semantic argument and incorporates the literal argument as its active zone. Thus, in 25, that is, she heard the piano, the meaning of heard is subject heard, the sound of object. and compare she heard the sound of the piano, and the active zone in the verb meaning is the sound emitted by the object referent.
Now in 26, that is, I'm in the phone book, the meaning of to be in the phone book is subject's name is printed in location, and the active zone is a name and its relation to the subject referent. Now Langacker argues that the difference between 27A and C, that is to play Monopoly is fun and Monopoly is fun, is due to alternative construals of the adjective, not a syntactic alternation. 27A, to play Monopoly is fun. B, Monopoly is fun to play. C, Monopoly is fun.
Now in transformational analyses, be fun, in 27B, Monopoly is fun to play, is semantically identical to be fun in 27A, that is, to play Monopoly is fun, and 27B, that is, Monopoly is fun to play, is syntactically derived by a movement of Monopoly to the main clause subject position. Tough movement. In Langacker's analysis, 27B, that is, Monopoly is fun to play, is not syntactically derived from 27A, that is, to play Monopoly is fun. Instead, be fun in 27B, Monopoly is fun to play, is semantically distinct from be fun in 27A, that is, to play Monopoly is fun.
Now 27A, that is, to play Monopoly is fun, takes an entity as its subject and has the activity carried out on the subject referent as its active zone. Support for the active zone analysis is suggested by 27C, that is, Monopoly is fun. The clause from which the subject would be moved in the syntactic analysis is absent, and yet 27C, that is, Monopoly is fun, is acceptable with an interpretation of be fun as in 27B, that is, Monopoly is fun to play.
Now the active zone analysis of 25-26, that is, she heard the piano and I'm in the phone book, is the opposite of the traditional metonymy analysis, in which it is the noun phrase that shifts profile, the piano, to the sound of the piano, I to my name. The verb, adjective or preposition, semantic shift is quite different from the usual examples of metonymy on verb phrases where, for example, go to the bathroom is metonymic for perform certain bodily functions, and pick up the phone in if you want to find out, you've only got to pick up the phone is metonymic for a more complex activity. In these latter examples, the profile is shifted from one event to an associated event in the same semantic frame. The semantic shift of the relational predicate in the active zone analysis for 25-26, that is, she heard the piano and I'm in the phone book, serves a different function.
Nunberg in 1995 argues for a distinction between noun and verb semantic shift, the latter equivalent to the active zone analysis or predicate transfer, as he calls it, using evidence from grammatical behaviors such as that cited above for 23-24, that is, that French fries is getting impatient and they play lots of Mozart. Now Nunberg argues that one advantage of active zone analysis is that in the sentence such as Ross is Jewish and widely read, one can account for the lack of zeugma by analyzing widely read as taking the author as subject, not his books. Hence, the subjects are truly co-referential.
Whichever is the best analysis for examples such as 25-26, that is she heard the piano and I'm in the phone book. The phenomena of profile shift or semantic shift appears to be a function of salience. Langacker notes that in 25-26, that is she heard the piano and I'm in the phone book, and 27b, C, that is Monopoly. To play Monopoly is fun. Monopoly is fun to play and Monopoly is fun as well. The effect of the semantic shift is to allow a more salient entity to be the semantic as well as the syntactic argument of the verb. I instead of my name. The piano instead of the sound of the piano. Monopoly instead of to play Monopoly.
Now, Nunberg argues that the primary pragmatic constraint on predicate transfer is the noteworthiness of the relationship of the predicate to its argument in the context. In cognitive linguistic terms, its salience in the semantic frame. For example, I'm in the Whitney Museum, said by an artist about her painting, confers a noteworthy property to the artist of being represented in a major museum. The same artist saying, I'm in the second crate on the right, does not. Nunberg also notes that noteworthiness is subject to construal. A jealous painter might say, those daubers get 1% shows while I'm relegated to a crate in the basement.